Hello everyone, I'm Grandmaster Denes Boros, and today I'm going to show you a game that I played versus Gawain Jones in the Title Tuesday tournament. Now, if you ever wonder, how does this go between Grandmaster versus Grandmaster? It's actually very tricky. So, this time I'm gonna show you how I think when I play a Grandmaster. So, the first move is already tricky. You're wondering, what should I play? Now, Gawain Jones is well known for being an expert of the dragon variation himself, even though I'm a fan of it all, but he is very well known to be an expert of this line. So I figured, how about I start with the non-standard move of knight c3? Is there a point of going knight c3 now? In fact, it's not as good as it looks. It's not too bad. I did plan to respond to d5 with d4 and getting into the Rapport Jobava variation, which is very interesting and topical these days. However, knight c3 is a good choice because it kind of passes the ball towards Gawain to decide how to continue. Now, Gawain can decide, okay, we're going to have a theoretical battle, and then he can go for d5 and be as exact as possible. Or he can get a chance to play something along of c5 or e5. But he chooses the fourth one, g6, which is also quite an interesting decision, saying that I am not ready to enter any debate, but let's bring down the gloves and have a street fight, which is actually a choice that I was happy with as well, because a win for both of us would have been very important. d4, and to my surprise, he played d5, which is also a very interesting choice in general, which I feel is an interesting choice. He might have put just pressure on d4 with bishop g7. However, d5 is saying, okay, never mind, I am open to your Rapport Jobava system, but I wanted to trick you and already force your hand with d4. I do not want you to take too much space with e4, which even in Grandmaster level is a big deal. So d5 is trying to take some space and sort of saying that, okay, now we can enter there. However, I decided I don't want to go bishop f4 anymore. I want to go my own way and play bishop g5. The idea being, I'm putting some pressure, pinning the queen, and putting pressure on that e7 pawn. Bishop g7, queen d2, knight c6. Very thematic play by Gawain Jones, immediately pouncing at that d4 pawn. Knight f3, knight f6. So basically the situation is set. Already there are some shades of the dragon. There's going to be an opposite side castling. Now, if I castle now, I felt that there could be some dangers of knight e4 and some sudden pressure on this square, knight e4. So I decided my opponent is likely to castle short. Why not warn my opponent that I know your intentions, you are going to go that way. Now, bishop h6 might not objectively be the best move, but from a psychological perspective, it was a source of provocation. I was provoking Gawain into action, and it actually works. Bishop takes h6, queen takes h6, bishop f5. Not at all a bad decision by Gawain. Not at all a bad decision, attacking the c2 pawn and kind of saying that the queen is misplaced. However, the queen does do a good job pressing and stopping that king from castling. Knight g4 can turn up at any time, and of course, I can castle short. I mean, long, that is. Now, castling short is not possible for black, but castling long is possible for me. Long castles, knight g4. And possibly this was the idea of Gawain saying, okay, you've lost time, and I'm going to punish you for that. Queen h4 and e5. Even though this move looks like the best move in the position, it turns out to be a mistake, which I kind of felt that is very likely. And I'll tell you why I thought this was a mistake during this sort of a blitz game. It is a 3-minute plus 1 second increment, so it's sort of a mix of a bit of blitz and rapid. So even though I hadn't analyzed this position, I felt I think I should be okay as long as this pawn on f2 is defended. So I went queen g3. And then I also realized that note that my opponent's king is still in the center where I already castled. So I was kind of optimistic. He takes d4, knight takes d4, knight takes, rook takes d4. And suddenly from the defender I become the attacker. Not only do I have pressure on the d pawn, but I'm also attacking this knight on g4. Knight f6. And here comes the big question that I was sort of asking myself, what should I do? Now, the first thought I realized that, hey, I could maybe win the pawn. Now, if I would have gone with first instinct, that would have been a mistake. Knight takes d5 would run into this very nice idea of castles, which I assume what Gawain saw. There's a lot of pressure on my pieces, and with my guy still in the garage, there's very good chances for Gawain to take over. There's good chances here in general, because after knight f6, queen takes f6, black is the one with the initiative, and my king is getting a little bit shaky. So here I kind of wondered, okay, I could even consider something like queen e5 check, but wait a minute. This king is still in the middle, and this rook is undefended. So if I could somehow get rid of or lure this knight away, I could get a big advantage. So I did consider queen e5 check as well, but after queen e7, this would only amount to one pawn, with black being kind of active with good chances to hold. So I realized, hey, it is time to blow it all open, especially as this king is stuck in the center. Now bishop takes is not possible, because I take here, you can't take because the queen is hanging, knight takes, and queen e5 check. And this was the whole point. If this happens, you can go this way, the rook is falling, and if you go king d7, I am just winning this piece as the pawn on d5 is pinned. So here my opponent, that is Gawain, came up with this good tricky idea of c5. Now again, this is a critical position. I can't think too long. Remember, this is a 3-minute game, but I also have to make an ideal solution and an ideal continuation. So I did consider taking on d5, but I felt if I take on d5, that can actually take away my advantage, because if I miscalculate, I'm going to lose the game. So I went rook d2. But it turns out, by the way, that rook takes d5 is the right way of playing. Knight takes d5, queen e5 check with the same idea. King here, queen takes d5, king c7, and after taking on f5, black does not have enough play for the two pieces, and white is much, much better. However, from a practical perspective, I like my move of rook d2. Remember, chess is part psychology. You want to pose the most problem to your opponent and not giving chances. If I go rook takes d5, I might give some sudden chances to Gawain Jones, and he's a dragon player. He might just find the right continuation. Bishop d7. Note again, there is no way of taking because of the same tactical trick. I attack the king. You can't go king d7 because of queen takes e4, and king f8 runs into queen takes h8. Bishop d7. And again, I'm at a pathway. I can give a check on e5. I can take on d5 or take with the knight. So there's three options. I've got to choose the optimal one. One slip and it's not a big advantage anymore. So here actually I took some time because I realized, hey, this is the moment. If I find the correct solution, I will be winning. If I mess it up, it can get messy, and you know, in a street fight, anything can happen. So I decided to play knight takes d5, and I think that was the right choice. Because if I go e takes d5, Gawain can castle, and already my pieces are a little bit more passive, and there's a good chance for Gawain to go for counter-attacking, let's say bishop d3, b5, with the threats of b4 or c4, with threats on this side of the board. So the reason I chose knight takes d5 is I realized you cannot really take still because of this queen e5 check idea. You can't really move the bishop anymore because I have this lethal threat of check and taking the queen. And if you take on d5, rook takes d5 is one thing, but the other and biggest problem is queen e5 check, and I win the same way. So Blank had to castle, but that already is sort of tantamount to resignation. And that kind of shows that making the best decisions in critical moments will win you the game. Right now, it just wins me the piece. Knight takes f6, rook takes f6, rook takes d7. And as impossible as it might sound, I am winning after 17 moves against Gawain Jones. Why? Because I chose 3 really good decisions and he made some risky decisions in the beginning. I mean, he was looking for a street fight, but I got the better of it. Queen e6, but here comes the phase that is the most difficult for some, and that is the technical phase. You are winning, but you have to minimize your chances, minimize the chances of your opponent of swindling you. So rook d5 might not be the computer's choice, but I kind of like that. I don't want to give that pawn if I don't have to. Queen takes e4, queen e5. And this is the move that, this is the move that I kind of consider the best. Queen e5 is the move that I kind of consider the best because I have pressure on that queen. There's no way out of there. You don't have real threats, and if you take, rook takes e5. Queen h4, g3. I'm stopping all these ideas, and if queen h6, I will just block it. Remember, if I exchange queens, I'm doing great. So queen a4, and here I realized there could be some lingering threats. If I start defending, then there is this very tricky idea of queen e4, and suddenly the winning position is gone. Surprising? Not so much. So therefore I decided I'm up a piece. Giving up a pawn is not such a big deal. Bishop d3, queen, rook e8, queen c3, b3. I'm making sure that this queen is cut off and also guarding the a1 square. b6, and my favorite move of all from the technical phase is king d2. Why? Well, now the king is actually in the optimal position, and with this queen trapped, Gawain is more than likely just to suffer in the endgame. There's no more attacks on my king, no more attacks on the king, rook a1 is coming, and the queen exchange is forced. Rook a1, queen b4, takes, rook a6. Now as the queen's gone off the board, I have a perfect position. Rook e7, rook d4, rook c8, takes, h5, rook c8, rook d8, king c3. Notice I'm trying to get out of the way from these tricks. But also, a side note, we were already on seconds, so these moves were of course not the perfect ones. Rook c6, king d2, just avoiding any trouble, f6, rook a4. And I decide it's time to come back with my pieces. g5, rook e4, rook d7, rook c4. Always giving the option for Gawain to exchange the rooks, as that will help me in the long run. Takes, rook e5, king h6, rook f5, rook d4, and now I actually avoid it because I feel that I'm going to win some extra pawns in this case. Rook d6, rook f6 check. So I want to exchange, but on my terms. Rook f6, and now I'm slowly gobbling up those pawns, and the game is headed to its normal conclusion. I push that g pawn, king e3, f4, g6, just a little trick. If you take, there's a check, and I win the rook. g6, king c5, rook e5, rook g5, and now it's clear I'm going to promote. g7, and after queens, Gawain Jones resigned. A very fascinating game where my opponent really went on to play a non-standard position, but actually burned himself just because he forgot to castle at the critical moment. Does that necessarily mean he's going to lose? Of course not, but a couple of slips led to a disastrous middle game and a winning position for me on move 17. So I really hope you enjoyed this lecture on my game versus Gawain Jones, and if you like it, please subscribe, and leave a comment if you have any thoughts on this game that we just played. Thank you for watching. See you next time.